I usually talk about the Thatcher house to help people understand the truth behind some of the myths and the urban legends that are out there, especially about the Devil's Chair. How many people have heard about that one? Usually we have a ton of people. Online it says that Cassadaga has a cemetery, which I already explained to you we don't. Spiritualists believe in cremation. There is no cemetery here. Second thing is they talk about the Devil's Chair located in the Cassadaga Cemetery, which is the Lake Helen Cemetery. The gravesite that they talk about is Mrs. Thatcher's gravesite. Mrs. Thatcher had a 7-year-old son, and he passed a spirit. She mourned his death, and she built a chair. Now, she was a very prominent, very wealthy woman. Because of that, she built the whole gravesite in bond bricks, which was a very thing to do if you were wealthy, and she built a chair. The chair was her sit-in chair, so every day she would walk down there because she lived 42 years after he passed, before she passed. And every day she was here, she walked down there, sit there, and that would be her time with her and her son in spirit for her to give to him. That's the purpose of the chair. There is. What it is there's a gravesite of the Thatcher's gravesite, and it's her and her son. Then there is the Thatcher gravesite across from there, but notice that the headstones were turned backwards. And if you look on there, it has a date that they were born, but not a death date. Wealthy people would buy gravesites like we would nowadays. People will buy their own gravesites. So they did that back then too, except it was very common for them to make the headstones in advance. And they just would not put a date that they died. Now, if people got in arguments, they would usually turn them around, which those are turned around. And they would say, I'm not being buried there, I'm going elsewhere, and get buried elsewhere. Those are empty at that gravesite. But that's why she was very rich, bought the grave sites, but they never got buried there.
Where's the gravesite?
In the Cassadaga, listen to me. In the Lake Helen Cemetery.
Oh, so it's not right here.
No, it's not here.
The Devil's Chair's up there too?
Yeah, that's what it is. Now also there's the white one, and it used to be red brick, but the family got so tired of being bothered, they painted it white. And that's why it's now white.
So
but
they call the red brick one they call the Devil's Chair, and they call the other one the
Yeah.
Angel Chair.
Well, what it is, well, yeah. I'm going to tell you guys the urban legend behind why they call it that. Back in the 14th century, over in England and Wales, they had a lake, and there was a red brick chair that was in the lake. The town used it as a punishment. So if someone did something wrong, it was worked off of a propulsion system. They would put people in the chair, they'd drop them down the water, and they'd put them back up, depending on what they did wrong, how many times they might have got dropped down, or how long they stayed in the water. There was a man and woman that loved each other. It's always a love story. The man was a statute, the woman wasn't. So she wasn't allowed to love him. So they put her in the chair. Say you don't love him anymore. Say you don't love him anymore. Kept dropping her in the water. Dropped her down one too many times for her not wanting to confess that she don't love him anymore. And she passed the spirit. Her family retaliated, tore the chair apart, took it out, threw it on top of a hill, said it was cursed, and called it the Devil's Chair. Every red brick chair in the world now is considered the Devil's Chair, even in Boston, Massachusetts, or any place else. Now, right around the 1950s era, there was a couple college students that realized they were studying urban legends, and guess what? We had some red brick chairs in the Lake Helen Cemetery, which was right next to the creepy town of Cassadaga, so they called it the Cassadaga Cemetery. Because of that, now going forward, we have the Devil's Chair in the Cassadaga Cemetery. Now, the craziest thing I've heard is you put a can of beer on the chair. At midnight, he'll come and drink it, and it will be unopened. Does that even remotely make sense? Okay. The true story is it's a 7-year-old boy's gravesite and his mother's gravesite, and she lived 42 years after he passed and went out there every day to sit with him. The end. No beer. But the next time they have a cleanup day, anyone is welcome to come help me clean up the millions of shards of glass that are broken around there.